Hey, Steve Mignani here doing the Junkyard Crawler at Bernardstown Auto Wrecking in Bernardstown, Massachusetts. Now recently we did the big R-Series truck behind me, but let's pay attention to this frame. This is a Studebaker truck frame. You're going to remember, Studebaker first built trucks in 1908 and ended around 63. And of course in World War II, 6x6 Studebaker trucks helped to win the war, tens of thousands of them. And again, between 08 and 63, hundreds of thousands of Studebaker trucks were built, from half-tonners all the way up to 5- and 6-ton trucks, similar to this one here. Now this one we can learn a lot from. We know it's a Studebaker because of a couple things. First and foremost, these are the wheels used on 1-ton Studebaker pickup trucks, believe it or not. They have 6 lugs, a Bud style stamped wheel versus the 5 lugs and a 1-piece wheel. This is a pretty heavy duty piece right here, a 1-ton truck. But what we do see here again is the split rims. And the downside of these puppies here is that if you don't know what you're doing when you assemble these things or put them in a cage, they can come apart and turn you into an astronaut. But the engine, this is a Studebaker inline flathead 6. Kind of an antique of an engine, but again, with a truck, you don't really need a whole lot of tech. This is a great engine, just chugs along all day long, low RPMs, 1-barrel carburetor. There's the one bibble right there, downdraft right into this. And the bones of this thing go back to the 1930s, and Studebaker used this engine in their Lark right up till the very end in like 63, before going to Chevy engines in the Canadian-built Studebakers of 64, 5, and 6. But the basics are here. And this transmission, by the way, is not from this Studebaker. This is from it's a Sunbeam Alpine is what this is, a Sunbeam Alpine. In fact, we've featured this, but this is the transmission from it. It's a British tranny, so pay no attention to the transmission behind the curtain. And speaking of curtains, that sound you hear back there, that slight buzzing noise, that's Katie being life flighted. A little bit of botulism in the roast, people. She'll be fine, fear not, but that's what that sound is. Ignore it. Anyway, as Katie goes to the hospital, we continue our work around this. Kind of interesting here, long before emission control devices, this is called a road draft tube, this thing right here. And this basically allows crankcase fumes and vapors to just find their way down below the truck. The air going below goes past the end of this tube, kind of drawing it out like a Venturi effect. And this cotter pin we see right here is there to secure the steel wool inside that helps to prevent junk from getting inside, but allows vapors to pass on their way out to your and my lungs. Now this also is a column shifted manual, kind of interesting right here. We can see the bones of the arrangement right here. Floor shifter was possible, but notice how when we move the lever, which is missing, but you can see the dog ears up here, make their little moves right here, and the links would come back to the manual located behind the flathead 6-popper. Now the drive shaft is gone, but it's classic body on frame construction right here. And again, a Studebaker 1-ton pickup truck, heavy duty pickup truck, maybe a standard cab, but with a stake bed or something like that. Now this is not to be confused with a heavy-duty 5-ton truck, which is right behind us, this thing here, which is a much larger proposition. But again, the good thing about Studebaker, like Dodge and GM and Ford, was they would sell you a 1-ton pickup truck if you needed something more than a 1/2 or 3/4 tonner. And at the back of those 1-tonners, to hold that weight, staged leaf springs, we see them here. Look at the number of leaves on these things. Looks like probably, I don't know, 15 leaves, but they're staged. This air gap right here, the bottom leaves don't come into play until the load is heavy enough to settle them down. They make contact, and then the bottom springs go into work. But the weirdest thing of all about these Studebaker 1-ton trucks is the dual wheels on the back, which was an option, and the full floating axles right here. We can see right there, you take these nuts off and the axle shaft can come out for service, but the wheel stays on. A large drum brakes at the back of this thing, kind of like the 4-tonner we showed earlier. But the one thing that's weird about this is the rear axle. This is very unusual. If you're not familiar with 50s and before axles, this is from Timken. Timken is a manufacturer of rear axles, but notice how it splits right in the middle. It doesn't have an inspection cover. The front doesn't drop out. It actually splits in the middle into 2 halves. What? It's riveted together. The tubes rivet into the cast iron housing. And it's not a torque tube. It's really, it's an open drive. But what a weird thing, the Timken. Well, to learn more, we go to the 1952 Motors Truck and Tractor Repair Manual. And in this, everything and anything you might want to know from a John Deere to a Dodge to a Studebaker Studebaker is in here, including the rear axles. And this is the page on the Timken split housing rear axle, and here's the guts inside. But what you won't see inside of one of these is a limited slip. Some of these did have a ratcheting differential, but for the most part these were open differentials. But here's that split axle on the 1-ton Studebakers, and of course other makes use the same basic axle. Timken was not owned by Studebaker, but they sold axles to Studebaker. Get out of there. Anyway, but going down a little further, the lighter duty Studebakers would have had the axles here. And we see right here, this is actually a more conventional axle with an inspection cover that comes off the back. And this, I'm not sure who made this one. Another Timken product here. And again, this is a semi-floating, full floating axle. But again, the inspection cover comes off the back, the center drops out, and the lightest duty rear axle found in Studebaker trucks was the faithful Spicer, also known as the Dana. And this is, if you know your Hemi Cooters, Hemi Roadrunners, it's the same basic form here. The inspection cover comes off. The 60 series, of course, being the big dog used in Hemi cars and stuff. They made 70s and of course, 37s, 44s, 45s. But this is the Spicer, the lightest axle of the bunch. But once again, you won't see inside of this clutches. It's an open diff. Limited slips didn't become a popular thing until 55, 56, 7. And so these would have been simply a matter of spin that right tire, which is another reason why four-wheel drive was the better thing if you really had to go off-road. But again, a pretty beefy frame under this thing. This would have been the cab up front, probably a stake bed, a 1-ton pickup. They did make pickup trucks, Studebaker did, with external fenders that came off to a wider to cover those tires. And it's a law that if the tire is spinning, it's got to be covered by metal up to the side to be DOT approved and legal for road use. So that's the story of the Timken rear axle. Don't call it a Spicer or even a Studebaker. Studebaker did not make their own axles. Again, being a small company, they made their own V8s. Yep, they could do that. Their own 6 cylinders. Yeah, their own frames, bodies, stuff like that. Although the bodies were made by Bud for Studebaker to their design. But unlike Ford, which made the 9-inch, or Chrysler with the 8 3/4, or GM with their 12 and 14 bolts, Studebaker relied on outside sources, including Timken, for their rear axles, and now we know. If you like this video, be sure to share it with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and by all means, hit the bell so you know when the next video comes out, which is tomorrow morning.